A lot of you have asked how I make my wood signs, so I'm going to show you today how I do that. I use the PVPP method. That's paint, vinyl, paint, peel. So I've already got my board here ready. I smoothed my wood down really well with, I sanded it down really well until it was smooth. And then I painted it the color that I want my letters to be. So I want my letters to be white. Now this is easiest when you have a light layer for your letters with the light color, because when you paint over it, if you have a darker color, it's not going to take as many layers of paint to really get it to look nice. So I do use darker color sometimes, but it takes longer. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show you with white. I use contact paper from Walmart as my vinyl in this case, and I also use it as my transfer paper, my transfer tape. So it can be kind of hard to see, but you can see how I've got it on there. I really like using this because when I put it on the wood and I really burnish it down, I rub it down, you can really see how well the vinyl is sticking. So I prefer that. So I'm going to go ahead and burnish this, and then I'll come back to show you what we do next. Okay, so I have most of it burnished down. I'm just going to show you how I do just the last little bit of it in case anybody has any questions about burnishing. Burnishing is basically just rubbing it down really well. So we're going to do that. And then I'll give you a look at what it looks like. A lot of people ask me too, or make comments about how when they use vinyl and transfer tape, it pulls up their paint. I find that this contact paper from Walmart does not pull up my paint. I'm also using acrylic paint. That's what I like to do. So I'm going to show you how it looks up close before we take our next step. So in person you can see it really well, but I get from a distance you have a little trouble. So I'm going to just burnish over this again just to make sure it's really on there. Up close you can see how well it's sticking to the wood. I know from a distance it's a little bit harder to see. I have some really thin lines here, so I'm being really careful when I burnish this. Alright, and then I'll show you our next step next. Okay, so now that we have our vinyl down and it's burnished on really well, we're going to I do 2 more layers of the white paint. That's going to seal our vinyl so that when we put the top coat on, if there were any bleeds with the white, when our top coat goes on, the white has sealed those in, preventing the top coat from bleeding. So I like to do 2 more coats because I like to go left to right, right to left, and then once this is dry, I'll come back and I'll do a coat from top to bottom. Now you don't have to put your paint on your board just like this. You can do a little bowl or whatever, but I usually just squirt it right on my board. It's less that I have to wash at the end. And I like to go left to right and right to left to make sure that we're getting it really on there in both directions, so that we can make sure that if there are any bleeds, we're going to do everything we can to prevent those bleeds from happening when we do our top color. I'm going to be using a turquoise, so I can refer to it as a turquoise if that makes it easier for you guys. But for now we'll stick with the white. So I'm going to just do this from left to right and make sure it's on there really well. And then I'll come back and I'll do top to bottom. Also make sure that you get your sides done. I like to make sure that I do at least 1 coat in the white to try to get the same color as my top will be once all of my paint layers are down. So I'll come back once this is dry and do it from top to bottom. Okay, now that that's dry, I'm going to paint from top to bottom now. And again, I like to just throw the paint on my board, but you can get a bowl or a dish or whatever you like to use. For me, this just works easiest. It's less cleanup for me, and I prefer that. I could even just throw it on my paper here, but again, I feel like it's less waste by just throwing it on the board. I'm just going to go up and down, and I like to go over it a few times just to make sure it's really getting in there. And it doesn't matter if you go up and down or left or right first, because you're going to do both. I just happen to do that, so it doesn't really matter though. I guess it's the look of your board, how you want it. If you have a preference for once the paint is peeled up, when you first paint your board, then you can choose, you know, top to bottom or left to right, but that's up to you. So I'm going to just finish this up here, and then once that dries, we're going to paint our top layer. I'm going to do my turquoise, and then once that dries, we will pull up our vinyl. Okay, now that both of our white layers have dried, I'm going to do my turquoise layer. And it doesn't really matter if you go side to side or up or down. I usually go side to side for this. That's just how I like the look of it. You're now able to see the actual vinyl much better with the color on top of it, not just all the white. Even though we used white as the base layer and it's lighter than this, we might need to do a few layers of the turquoise just to cover up that white. I may be able to kind of go back over it with a thicker layer after this. I like to usually just get it all covered up first, so we'll have to see how that goes. But I usually you don't have to go over do more than one layer if it's the lighter color is your writing. But I actually kind of like the way this looks with the white kind of showing underneath it, so I think I'm going to leave it. It kind of looks, I don't know, I like the look of it. It's pretty cool. So I may end up just leaving that. But I'm just going to make sure I get around my vinyl really well. And don't forget your edges. Usually I just kind of do this and get them on there, and then when I'm done with the whole sign and everything's dry, I'll go back over and I'll really brush them on just if I need to. This actually, I've had enough on this foam brush to get in there, but if you don't, and I know that I'm painting onto my paper, so that's going to end up sticking to my sign, which is okay. I'll just pull it up a little once I'm done with everything and ready, everything's dry. I'll just pull it up. It's not a big deal for me, but you can do it on a different surface, or you can paint the sides after, whatever your preference is. This is just how I like to do it. And I notice I have a little clump there, so I'm just gonna kind of quick back and forth. I might do just a little bit more and just touch up a few of the spots a little bit more. Now sometimes, depending on how many layers you put on, it might be a little harder to see your vinyl, but I'll show you guys once this is dry and I can pick it up and give you a better view. And I'll show you, it really is easy to see the vinyl up close. Even if you have a couple layers on it, you'll be able to see it just fine. So I'll show you guys that after this layer dries. And once this layer is dry, then we can pull up our vinyl. Some people like to pull it wet. I really prefer when it's dry. I've noticed that when I wait until it's completely dry, that I really get no bleeds. I did rip my vinyl before I put it down in one place, right up here around the A. So I might have a tiny bleed there, but that's okay. I know that that's because I ripped my stencil. So, you can kind of see the lettering now. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll come back. I'll give you guys a better view, and then we'll pull up our vinyl. Okay, now that our paint is dry, we're going to pull up our stencil. I'm going to show you up close. You really can see where the vinyl is, so you won't have trouble. So I use this Tim Horton weeding tool. I really like it. I got it on Amazon. I don't know if they sell it in stores or whatnot, but I usually try to carefully grab in to where like a piece of my vinyl and just get my little pick in there. I try not to get the wood, so I'm really careful about it. And I just pull it up and just throw it over to the side. So for those of you watching this, if you want to go ahead and fast forward until we get to the end, you're more than welcome to do that. It's up to you. I will actually probably, to save you all some time, just go ahead and stop this portion of the video, pull up all of my stencil, and then I'll go ahead and start the video back up to show you guys the finished product. That will be much easier. It's gonna take a little while. Okay guys, I pulled up all of my vinyl contact paper and I'm gonna show you the final result. As you can see, there are no bleeds. So it worked really well. There's a few places that I got my pick in there a little too much and it pulled up the paint, but there's no bleeding. Normally I use acrylic paint as my base layer for my lettering, and then I use chalk paint as my top layer. Definitely prefer that to the acrylic as my top layer. And if you do happen to have any bleeds, you can do touch-ups with either a small, thin paintbrush, or I really actually like to use Q-tips. I'm sorry, toothpicks. I feel like it's much easier to control just how much, especially if you don't have a little area. So that's how I use the PVPP method.